Welcome everyone to European Guanxi's latest webinar. I am Barbara, the Vice President, and I will be moderating today's event. So the topic for today is smart cities and the social credit system, and we will be analyzing the cases of both China and the European Union. We are honored to have Simone Pierani as our guest speaker today. Simone Pierani is an Italian journalist with a strong interest in China, where he lived for nearly a decade. He's a foreign correspondent for the Italian language newspaper, Il Manifesto, and has written for Il Fatto Quotidiano and Wired, amongst others. He's the founder of China Files, a press agency whose main focus is on China, but also reports on the wider Asian continent. Beyond his work as a journalist, he's the co-host of Rixio, a podcast on contemporary China, and a renowned author. His latest book, Red Mirror, deals with the topics of technology and the future, tackling issues such as AI, WeChat, green technology, and smart cities. We hope you enjoyed this webinar and join the discussion at the end. Please, Mr. Pierani.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks for the invitation, and it's an honor to me to be here. I would like to make, I'm going to say, a couple of brief premises before starting a discussion, before talking about the two topics which are moreover connected to each other. The first has to do with the method, okay? Because often in the West, when we talk about technological issues connected to China, especially on what is called the social credit system, we usually use terms such as dystopia and disturbing or nightmare or Black Mirror, you know. And indeed, it could be. But my opinion is that this is a projection of Western fears, because as we will see later in the webinar, something similar to what is happening in China is already happening to us. And other things, how can I say, are watched very carefully by our governments and our states. In general, I believe that two types of reading should be avoided on China. The first is what I call whataboutism, but the writing of China in contrast to the West, and I think in an absolute way for China. I will show, sorry, an example. If we talk about Xinjiang, usually a lot of people say, okay, but what about Guantanamo? I think this is not the correct way to talk about China. The second is based on what we can call Chinese exceptionalism, which in many cases justifies some particular aspects, which however must be analyzed in their context and not only in the Chinese one, okay? Because China today is perfectly engaged in the context of the global market. And this is the way I think we must analyze it in this context, in addition, of course, especially to the Chinese characteristics. But what happens in China today depends on and influences the rest of the world, especially when we talk about technologies, okay, a topic which, while in one hand provides excellent interpretative keys for economic development, to better understand also some dynamics of domestic markets in China. And in part, all these things, the technological ones, is in a general and global context, is what the writer, the thinker, Shoshan Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism. The second premise is more introductory to the topic, because what we see today in China in terms of scientific development is the result of a process that began a long time ago. It's not something really new, okay? This is about our idea of future, but in China, this process take a long time, start a long time ago. In the mid of 50s, in particular, Chen Shuzhen, the scientist, he's considered the father of Chinese missile program, introduced the concept of cybernetics in China. We talk about relation between men and machines, okay? He wrote a book called Cybernetic. At the same time, in a Western country, we have the Boehner's one about cybernetics. And with Chen Shuzhen, the study of what is called the systems engineering, was born in China in the middle of the 50s. And for cybernetics, we have to, the meaning of cybernetic is, how can I say, the concept to manage a country as a whole. And the Chen Shuzhen team, it was an elite of scientists that survives also during the Cultural Revolution, had a great influence in contemporary Chinese history. Let's think, for example, to one-child policy. It was his team to manage all the process after the Western countries put an alert on Asia. They said, you are too many, okay? So Deng Xiaoping come back and said, Tai Duran, we are too many, how can we do? What can we do? And so Chen Shuzhen and the other scientists works on a scientist model that was used for the one-child policy. Today, you know, this policy is no more used in China. And it is under a strong scrutiny because, for example, they didn't consider some social elements connected with the growth of China. But the idea developed in those years by Chen Shuzhen and the other scientists was that society can consider it as a software. And as a software, it can be programmed, coded, modified, and even foreseen. These ideas since then have continuously developed so that, for example, social credit, talking about social credit, in the end of the 90s, Jiang Zemin, that was the General Secretary Party of Chinese Communist Party, in a discussion, he said that China has to create a social credit system. And what happens in China today is also the results of some historical process added to specific events, in particular the crisis of 2008, which prompted the Chinese leadership to change, to modify Chinese production system. Given to the decline in purchases from the Western markets, China has revised its export-based model to focus on the domestic market and innovation, something similar to what we see today with the new 5-year plans, okay? And the acceleration on artificial intelligence, IoT, the Internet of Things, and the great strength of Chinese digital brands was born in this period, in 2008. Today, the Secretary of Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, collects and relaunched, for example, with quantum physics, the Chinese modernization program. So this is an introduction, just to understand that what we are talking today is not really new in China, okay? And I think that the combination of smart city and the social credit system is very important also for us because China is thinking about a new concept of citizenship if we mix the two things, okay, smart cities and social credit system. About smart cities, as you already know, we use this term related to the use of technology to improve urban infrastructure and services. We talk about systems for transport, mobility, parking, energy, water treatment, waste management, and security aspects, thanks, for example, to the video cameras. Smart cities are based on the so-called Internet of Things. And of course, China, with its 5G development, is surfing this wave, we can see, okay. Smart city is very important in the nowadays discussion in China. It's an everyday expression used by Chinese politicians. You can find everyday articles about this topic, so Chinese media. And smart city is also a keyword for the Xi Jinping's new era. In fact, China has made the smart city part of its national development strategy. The concept was endorsed by President Xi Jinping already at the National Urbanization Convention in 2015, and later was explicitly mentioned in the 13th five-year plan, the one between 2006 and 2020, and it was adopted in 2016. Since then, the central government has massively encouraged the development of smart cities across Chinese national territory. In January 2019, China set to reach 500 smart city pilot projects, ready or under construction. Today are more. China has also urged technology companies to become leaders at the global level and to reach out to foreign cities in support of their own smart city development. This is very important to understand how Chinese smart city influenced also our project here in the Western country. In fact, China often promotes its smart city through existing bilateral or regional frameworks. It's something that China is going to export as well as manufacture and high technology products. In fact, smart cities are the result of Chinese technology process. So we have two big examples. One is City Brain in Hangzhou. The other one is the project of projects, the smart city of the smart city, the smartest city of the smartest city in the world, Xionggang. So about the first one, you have to imagine having the GPS of the majority of a city vehicles, cars, trucks, etc., in a single database, as well as real-time data from video cameras, traffic lights, or updated maps of the city. And this information is added to the historical data from previous days, weeks, months, maybe years. The result is City Brain, the Hangzhou's total traffic control system designed by Alibaba that has its headquarters in Hangzhou. So the local government could not refuse this project. But Alibaba is not the only Chinese company to invest heavily in smart city solution. Huawei itself launched its own dedicated smart city platform. The company states its technology used in more than 150 cities spread among 40 countries. And in fact, as we see for the Xionggang project, a lot of countries are involved in these projects, especially European ones. The North European ones are really big partners of China in these projects. And they are studying what China is doing to try to export some models in our cities. The principle that everything will be connected to the internet using 5G networks is called, as I already said, Internet of Things. And thanks to this, smart city will manage more aspects of life, like energy distribution, manufacturing, public services, entertainment services, will be controlled by artificial intelligence-driven systems. But while tech companies, especially tech companies, governments, authorities, and city planners are praising the advantages of smart city projects, it's also important to explore the possible negative implication of the system. A lot of critics are warning that many citizens are unaware of the potential impacts that China's data collection system might have on their personal privacies. Questions are being raised whether smart cities are mainly designed for surveillance and management of their inhabitants. In fact, today in China, there's a big discussion, for example, about the facial recognition. A lot of people understood that they don't know where these data go, who manages these data, what they do with these data. For this reason, there's a new draft of the data protection law that has a focus on the facial recognition, okay, that is used in daily life in China in a lot of aspects of life, shops, compounds, and so on. But one thing is for sure, okay, smart cities are here to stay, as a lot of optimists said. And for these, many Western cities are also implementing technologies to make their city smarter. There are a lot of examples also in Europe. One of the most important is the Smarter London Together. And so all the Western countries are very interested in what China is doing on the smart cities project. And the most important project that is going on in China is the Xiongan 1, because the President Xi Jinping himself unveiled plans to create this new area, okay? And this innovative development zone has been cast as an integral piece of what Xi Jinping calls the crucial strategy for the millennium to come, and is part of the drive to cement China's credential as a leader in urban development and the incorporation of new technologies into infrastructure. How can we say about this? That some regard the project as a strategic move by the President Xi Jinping to instigate an urban miracle linked to his terms in office, taking the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone and the Shanghai Pudong's new area, which are usually associated with the administration of Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin, respectively. Xiongan is not only undergoing a rapid transformation with the goal of relieving the strained capital, but also strive to become a world-class eco-friendly smart city, areas that the authorities are keen to incorporate in future urban planning endeavors. In this context, the integration and application of the Internet of Things, the IoT, technologies, artificial intelligence, big data, cloud computing, has been strongly encouraged in the planning and designing of the city. According to Chinese authorities, the use of these new intelligent technologies will bring far-reaching change in terms of urban development. The hope of Chinese authorities is to be able to plan in such a way that those innovation technological tools will not only improve energy efficiency, but also reduce the management expenses. On Xiongan, we have also special emphasis that has been placed on building the so-called intelligent infrastructure with features such as smart sensor and lighting, as well as facial recognition system, all of which are conceived of ways to reduce time and manpower as well, being invested in these areas, in order to optimize space management, transport, water, and electricity infrastructure. We'll also build underground. Okay. Of course, this is a project in which are involved a lot of big tech companies, Chinese big companies. Several leading Chinese companies have already signed cooperation agreements with Xiongan local governments. Baidu, for example, has been testing self-driving cars equipped with its Apollo platform, that is a special platform for smart cities. And China Mobile as well has made similar demonstration with its new 5G remote control driving technology. The self-drive cars, for example, is one of the most interesting projects nowadays in China, is especially for public transportation. Okay, and self-drive cars were already used during the pandemic, the first period of pandemic in China, for the transportation of doctors or food or medical equipments, for example. They already used. Of course, Alibaba opened free office in Xiongan and has introduced its artificial intelligence city brain platform, as we see in Hangzhou, designed to improve traffic management also in Xiongan. And in Xiongan are working a lot of European companies, okay? But the project is going on with a lot of problems because the area is not the best one to build this kind of city. But we have to imagine that all the tech sector in China is involved in this project. This is the first project they want to realize, because Xiongang want to be an example for Asia, and not only Asia, of what is a smart city for China. But the question is, who can live in these smart cities? Of course, maybe people who can pay the rent very high, I imagine, of this city. And maybe we can say that the citizens of this city have to be, how can I say it? They need to have a good score of what we call the social credit system. Two things are really matched. The social credit system, I think a lot of you have already listened a lot about this topic. I use the definition that Roger Cremer's, Leighton's professor, used in a very interesting paper, even if after the first paper he wrote also a lot of articles in which he fits his interpretation of social credit system. The social credit system is an ecosystem, we can say, of initiatives at the central and local level, operated by state and private sectors, okay, that largely share a fundamental logic. That logic is very simple: to incentivize individuals and businesses to improve their behavior by creating a consequence for their behavior. In the social credit system, we have two words. One is the business one, and the other one is for citizens. For the first one, involve companies, we have to understand a very important point, okay? Is it working also for foreign companies, for example? It seems yes. The social credit system for the central government departments in China means creating information sharing platforms to enable blacklist, okay? The first thing we have to know about social credit system is the blacklist system. Those breaking particular laws and regulation will appear on a blacklist that restricts them from doing certain defined things. At the central level, there are over a dozen of these lists, a lot. Among the best known is a list for non-performance of court judgments, with more than 40 governments, departments, and organizations participating, as well as private parties. This is the list with the broadest consequences, from prohibiting luxury purchases and air travel to limitation on jobs and loans. Okay. Other lists are more specific, for instance, for misconducts on trains and airplanes, and their sanctions are more focused. But the blacklist process, from a legal point of view, is intended to be disproportionate. Okay. I forget to pay something that occurred, obliged me to pay, and I can't, for example, buy ticket trains, high-speed ticket trains. About this blacklist, we have to be really clear, okay? Because there is no numerical scoring involved with this blacklist. Usually when we talk about social credit system, a lot of Western media talk about the Black Mirror, you know, the nosedive episode in which people judge themselves with apps, and the consequences are very bad. But these kind of things, the blacklist, doesn't involve any algorithmic decision making. Okay. Scoring in this kind of blacklist for people and for companies present in a limited way in the financial credit scoring system run by the People's Bank of China. But it is not very dissimilar to, for example, the FICO scores that is used in the United States. A different thing is a different world is what we can find in a lot of projects run by cities or counties in China. Imagine, like we did in the city brain of Alibaba had Hangzhou. Imagine you are living in a city where citizens have a social rating. Okay? Imagine that each of the inhabitants of the city starts with a score recognized by the authorities, for example, 1,000 points. Imagine that these starting points may gradually decrease due to violation of specific legal, administrative, and moral rules. For example, does one of the security cameras, in China there are a lot, based on artificial intelligence and big data, take a picture of you, and they know that the picture is about you because of facial recognition, and they take a picture of you while you commit traffic infringement. Okay, 50 points go away. Do we have one more child than state family plans? You know that now there is no more than one child policy, but there are strict policies in some areas. 50 points. Are you unable to pay the loan you requested for the bank? Another 50 points goes away. Imagine also that these lost points can be recovered through virtuous behavior, perhaps participation in an event organized by the party, the Communist Party, or post on social media in which he praises a campaign by the city government. And imagine that on the basis of these scores, citizens are classified with levels from A to D, and depending on their position, they are considered more or less virtuous, and as such favored or disadvantaged in accessing essential services. Okay, we can like or not this system, but this social design already exists in China, even if there is no a national database that manages all this blacklist and scores. Okay. In 2010, as Roger Creamers reported in his paper that I suggest you to read, the Chinese social credit system and evolving practice of control, the city of Suining, for example, introduced a system of mass credits, or a program through which the individual conducts of its inhabitants are measured and evaluated. Obviously, it's the Chinese Communist Party that decides the area. The category changed and the possible inclusion in the blacklist and the consequent sanctions. So all the Chinese people are under this kind of judgment. So now the question is, it's so different from our world, what's happening in China? Yes or not? In a report published by the European University Institute that is called okay, the Chinese social credit system, a model for other countries, question mark. We read that, let me find it. Okay, the success of eBay and similar sites like websites like Airbnb, Uber, for example, has long been attributed in part to how a platform has become trusted to users. Trust in a sales platform is said to be due to a combination of payment security, reliable and cost-effective system for resolving disputes, and trust-building measures, such as the mutual evaluation system, which allows you to verify the online reputation. So the evaluation are reciprocal, we can say. We judge the drivers who take us to the address we ask them, and the driver judges us as a passengers. The same happens with Airbnb. In this case, we are faced with transparent rating system. Okay, even if we don't like it. And in conclusion, in the report, the author wrote, the intuitive parallel with the Chinese system is that even in the West, individuals are rated with a single score and that this score can have a variety of consequences. However, there are some profound differences. The most obvious is that the social credit system is not based on the subject rating of other citizens. We can say that maybe these subjectivities is closer to Western ratings such as Uber and Airbnb, that the more objective and more algorithmic emerging in the Chinese one. So the question is, we prefer to be judged by state or other citizen? Of course, as we see, the social credit system is not something already works all over the Chinese country. And the Chinese authorities are working on it. And the system or disturbing, but it could be, okay, because we are talking about a country that is ruled by only by one party, okay. And of course, this could be a great chance to control in a stricter way its population. And I think that we have to look very carefully on what happens in China in terms of surveillance and in terms also of solutions that Chinese people is going to find. So my hope is that if China today is seen as a surveillance country, I hope we can say also something news about, for example, data protection law, and a new regulation of facial recognition. That is something very, very important also in the Western countries. You know that a lot of European countries, for example, in Italy as well, we have a lot of examples of authorities that take our data from facial recognition cameras, and we don't know what they are doing with these data and where these data are going. Okay. So we have to look carefully what is happening in China, because our future will depend every day more on data, on artificial intelligence, and where is more used, for example, in China. Maybe we can have some solution about this data. I think that European countries have to be very clear. Okay, we have a very strict privacy policy, but we have to be very clear, because European Union, the risk for European Union is become a battleground between China and the USA. So we have to protect our data, because the platform, the companies, and the states use this data that we usually give them in a free way. We are not very concerned when we do the post on Facebook or when we talk on WhatsApp. And I think that the European countries have to be very strict with the use of data, especially when our data are used by third parties, okay, or other countries. And in the end, we can say that China is already influenced some projects, because we have a lot of governments that are watching very carefully what's happening in China. We have seen during the coronavirus pandemic, okay, especially in Italy, for example, my country, we have a lot of discussion on the Chinese model, how it works, but it's very hard to transplant the value system, the Chinese characteristics in another country. So the point is this: what's happening in China influences already our life, and we can watch also in China to find some solution that last or before we need to look at what happened in China to find some solution also here, because the use of data by the governments is the same.
Thank you, Simone. Um, Thank you for your great insight on this fascinating topic. Before we move on to the audience questions, Mr. Pierani, I have just a few questions for you. As you were concluding with the question of data privacy and data protection, this is something that we are increasingly worried about, considering that many believe data to be a gold mine and the key to the future, as it amplifies the possible improvements and developments of new technologies. So as we try to catch up with China, that has been greatly developing technology in these emerging areas, uh, there there are questions of data privacy and data protection, which, as you mentioned, there is now a draft on the data protection, and the GDPR was passed for 2 years ago. But do you think there is a way that we can ensure that data is collected and disseminated in a sustainable manner, which protects the individual's rights?
I don't know. I think it's our it's our struggle, it's our responsibility to remind the governments that these data have to be public, transparent, and they have to. We have to know what they are doing with these data. Of course, there are two different roads. Okay, you can see. The first one is our attention. It's our. We have to. How can I say? We have to manage carefully our data first of all, because nowadays the surveillance capitalism is an extractive model from ourselves. Okay, because this importance of big data depends on in our everyday life. We disseminated data. Okay, in every minute of our life, we are giving for free companies and governments our data. So we have to be. I think we have to use carefully some socials and all these kind of things, and to watch carefully what are privacy settings of everything we use everything. The second aspect is what we can ask to our government. Okay, so I think that data have to be considered as water, public services. Okay, so the the question we have to ask to ourselves is if we prefer a public use of data or private use of data. And to the companies, we can ask a lot of things. For example, the new draft of data protection of China is very clear, very strict against the companies. Okay, the private sector is under scrutiny in a strong way by the Chinese rulers. And for this reason, this draft is very close to the GDPR. But of course, is a protection law with Chinese characteristics. There's nothing about the use that government can do with these data. But I don't know if it's very different from us. How many things the government are doing with our data, and we don't know what they are doing. You know, for example, in Italy, there was a big discussion about this topic because the pandemic, okay? So we used an app that is called Immuni. At the beginning, we don't know how it works. So why, okay, we have to be considered so stupid to as we cannot understand what they're doing with this data. I think we have to know, and we have to say it loud to our governments. But of course, it's something that I don't know how how could be the future about this, but we have a great responsibility on this topic.
Thank you. My second question is, in your book, Red Mirror, you mentioned how in order to build the smart cities of the future, which are green and sustainable, it is indispensable to use technological tools and goods, many of which are built from rare earth materials. While other rare earth mines are being opened, resuming operations in countries such as South Africa, Greenland, and the US, China remains a predominant supplier as the world's most heavy rare sources are found in Chinese territory. Do you believe that China will maintain this monopoly and other countries will continue to depend on Beijing for these materials? Are there viable alternatives, particularly for Europe, as it seeks to develop smart cities?
Well, I think so. Especially today, in which we have this challenge between US and China. We know that Trump shift from the Obama's policy to contain the Chinese power. Trump went directly against China, but I think the source of this fight is technology. You know, okay, you are very young, but our life in the past years was for after the Second World War, it was clear that the United States have a dominant position about innovation, technology, and security. Because when we talk about 5G consumer issues, we are talking about security of the country, the communication system of the country. So this is a problem that the United States put very strongly in the international arena. You know, what Trump said, that 5G networks, the Chinese 5G network, thanks to the 5G networks, Chinese Communist Party can control all over the world. All of our information can be seen and controlled by the Communist Party. So we are talking about security, but the same way we have to know that is a big shift for Western countries, for the Western world, because after the Second World War, United States produced all the innovative stuff, technologies that we already use today. But nowadays, the world is changing. All these things came from Asia, not only China, because there are a lot of countries in Asia that are developing a lot of things about app systems, algorithms, artificial intelligence. Things over TikTok, for example, is the first Chinese algorithm, think for Chinese people that is so popular also in the Western country. So I think China, and you remember, for example, when Trump put the first sanctions against China, Xi Jinping, the day after was on the Chinese newspaper, we saw Xi Jinping in Red Heart's factory. Okay, it was just an answer. Okay, as I say, we have these things, you haven't. So what? I think China don't want to lose its strength in this competition. So I think in the future we have to manage our relation with China. I think Western countries have to stop trying to moralize China. Okay, 1,400,000,000 people in China. We can hope they disappear suddenly. Okay, so we have to manage this relation with China. We have to understand how our relation can be. How can we trust each other? And I think the Western media, for example, especially in Italy, country I know best, we have to understand how to communicate, how to understand better China. And then, of course, ask China a lot of things we have to ask, because there's also an hypocrite behavior of a lot of European countries. You know, they didn't have any problem to put their production in China, even if they know that in China the wages are low, the workers are exploited, but they never put this as an important question when they have to do with China. Then suddenly there is the human rights problem, and so on. I think we have to ask a lot of things on China. For example, a very strict law about data when our data are taken by, for example, e-commerce services in China. But we have to find a way to understand each other, first of all. If we can do this, we are talking about words that can communicate each other, and I think it's not good for our future.
Thank you. Now we have our first question from the audience, which is from Ilaria Tassari. Would you like to turn on your mic and ask the question?
Thank you so much, Simone, for being with us today. I'm Ilaria Tassari, Vice President of European Guanxi, and I would like to provide my personal comment and one question for Simone. social credit system and smart cities are a crucial topic, are crucial topics that are, and I think that they will be more and more important. They will be key in understanding the role of China in worldwide technological development. So also its impact on strategic relations and global politics, and in particular its progress and challenges at the national level pertaining China. And you have rightly spoken about Xiongan, but also the recent case of Hangzhou regarding facial recognition and local policies. So prior to understanding EU-China relations on this matter, I think it's fundamental, as you have rightly pointed out, to analyze China as well as Europe, and this is mainly the scope of this webinar, to understand them in their progressive development, issues in different social and regulatory frameworks. I think it's been teaching, for me at least, but I think I'm speaking for everyone, to hear some additional remarks and to add some additional layers in the picture you have already outlined in your book, Red Mirror, specifically about these cases where they focus on these two main actors and their different approaches. These different approaches are not without linkages, in my opinion. So my question is, if in your point of view, we can find some specific exemplary cases describing the transformative effects and also the influential role of Chinese use of technologies for building smart cities in Europe. And is it possible to identify also some real cases or elements pointing in the direction of a linkage or correlation between the Chinese social credit system and the European system? And if there are any nowadays, how to ascribe them in the wider context of EU-China current and future relations? Thank you.
Ciao, Ilaria. Thanks. It's a very hard question. Okay, first, okay, as I said, there are a lot of systems like the FICO. There's also something similar in Germany. But, you know, even in Italy, when you want to rent an apartment, usually the owner asks you a lot of documents, for example, the credit documents, banks documents. As well, the banks ask you a lot of documents, or your credit scores in the bank of your bank account when you want to do some purchase, big purchase, for example, an apartment or so on. So this is very similar. Okay, it's not dissimilar what happens in Europe from what happens in China. About the social credit system, the personal one, I did some example of our daily life in which we judge some other, or we are judged by some other. We can say that all the world now is going to a gamification system of this kind of relationship, okay, in which we are every day involved in some kind of judgment. The difference is that in China, it's the state to judge people, in particular the Chinese Communist Party. In Europe, we judge each other, okay, single. I can judge you, you can judge me. I can judge a taxi driver, you can judge me if I'm a good passenger, so, or Airbnb, etc. There is nothing similar in Europe. There is nothing in Europe. We don't have the scores of our citizens. Okay, but of course, if you are not a good client of Airbnb or Airbnb, you have some problems to maybe to rent a flat or something like this, or if the drivers judge you very bad, the same. Okay, but I think that the linkages are more. We could have more linkages in the future. Why? Because the technologies that are used every day in China are products that China is already exporting. Okay, for example, United States import a lot of cameras and robots from China, as well as our cities in Europe. So this is already a big linkages, because now we are using Chinese technologies, high technology. Okay, no more just pens or these kind of things from the Chinese shop in our cities. And I think that there is a big chance also for Europe now to invest in China in terms of services and technology services, because with the new 5-year plans that put a lot of attention on domestic market, on services more than production. And you know, the Chinese market is big, but it's also very can I say, it is no more the market of 20 years ago that it was very simple. You put a product and a lot of people buy it. Now it's very hard for foreign companies to go on this market and to find a place in this market. And I think that the new era of Xi Jinping, it is very focused on domestic market, is an opportunity also for European countries. I had a lot of discussion during these days, thanks to Zoom and other sectors, with a lot of Italian people, for example, involved in a lot of technological process in China. We sell to China a lot of products they need for this development. Okay, we know that China will become maybe the leader, the world leader of artificial intelligence, but they need a lot of help from other countries. Okay? Let's think to the microchips, for example. Okay, that is a very big problem for China because they are not able nowadays to produce microchips as United States or Taiwan. And geopolitical war with USA is really put in danger a lot of Chinese companies. In these days, in Chinese media, there are a lot of articles about Huawei. If, for example, Huawei can survive, okay, after this war that Trump declared to microchip semiconductors industry. Then I think there are more linkages with smart cities because maybe we don't have smart cities similar to the Chinese one, but we use a lot of Chinese technology. So let's think, let's imagine, I am the mayor of an Italian city. I use the Chinese cameras. I use the Chinese algorithms. I use a lot of Chinese things. Why? It's normal that I have the idea. Why don't use also the social credit system, for example, to manage my city? Why not? When the citizens accept that for the security of their life, you can live in a city with a lot of cameras, you already did something very Chinese, okay? And this is why in China you can see a lot of these kind of technologies, because the pact is very clear, okay? You can be rich, but you give us some of your rights. Are we ready to do this? I hope not, but but there is a possibility that in the future we can do this. Let's think to the coronavirus. Okay, why China was able to manage this after? Okay, we know they have a lot of problems at the beginning, but because technologies and collective way of thinking was superior ours in the end. So they use technology, for example, for the tracing of everyone of the Chinese citizen. So technology was very important, and our government understand this, for example. So I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ilaria, for your question as well. Can we have Connor Nolan ask his question?
Just wanted to thank you for your presentation. First of all, it was brilliant and some amazing points made. Essentially, my question sort of overlaps with a couple of other questions, but into a more confined manner about what you mentioned. So you mentioned firstly America and the last century of essentially weaponized interdependence that resulted from their lead in tech. And I was just wondering, what do you think with regards to the Belt and Road Initiative and how the spread of infrastructure and spread of this technology, etc., even though we're technically using some Chinese software already, do you think that we can balance positives that come from the Internet of Things and the technology that comes along with that, with the negatives that would result from weaponized interdependence on China? And if you think that the compromise on data security is viable and whether it can be trusted. Thank you.
Okay, I had some problem to listen. About the Belt and Road Initiative, I think it's a big topic nowadays because, as you know, before the coronavirus, Chinese government put in a after a great moment for the Belt and Road Initiative, you know, in which they launched the project all over the world. They did a lot of memorandum of understanding with a lot of European countries, Italy as well. But this project was under a hard scrutiny by the international community. You know, the debt trap, for example. And in the end, you know, how Chinese are working. No? At the beginning, just the Belt and Road Initiative was just these two, two Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, the maritime one and the one, but the polar, was the polar, you know, Silk Road. But then they understood that it was too much. Okay, because everything happens, for example, in Africa or America, okay, it's a Belt and Road Initiative, but there's a lot of problems to local governments, okay, and China, even if they say they are not involved in domestic problems of every country, in the end, they really push a lot of governments during, for example, the election, let's think to Sri Lanka, Maldives, and other countries. So they retreat a little, okay, because they were afraid that it was too much. A lot of countries doesn't want their project because they understood that the Belt and Road Initiative is something commercial, but it's also something geopolitical. China want to control a lot of places in which the very sensitive place in the world. Let's speak with Djibouti or Suez and other countries. It's something that we can assume as well as what we know as imperialism. Okay, we can say that it's a paternalistic one, Confucian one. I don't know. We can use a lot of different terms for the Chinese ones, but in the end, was this. Okay, Xi Jinping was very clear. Okay, we are a responsible country. We can manage all the globalization because the United States retreat from globalization with Trump. Of course, now with Biden, everything maybe is going to change, even if we know for sure that the vision understood that China is the problem for the United States. Okay, so Biden maybe change their behavior, the way is more educated, more maybe not like Trump that every day with Twitter disasters. We know that the Road Initiative is a big problem for the United States because, of course, China is not only exporting thanks to Belt and Road Initiative manufacturing products, but is also exporting technological products. And now we know that it's exporting also medical products. There is a restyling of Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, now we are talking about sanitary Belt and Road Initiative, because a lot of countries needs these products, and only China is ready to give them. About data security, I don't know, because it's very, especially the cross-border data is something very hard to understand how to manage this. And even because we are going to the so-called sovereignty of internet, as someone called, okay? And China is a champion in this. Xi Jinping and China, every time they said that the internet has to be considered as a territory, okay, with borders. So what is you can do in China is different from what you can do in the United States. The problem is that China, in this reciprocity, is going to do what the European Union is doing now. When your data are when a company is working in European countries, have to accept the rules of European countries. Now China is doing the same. Okay, but there are a lot of problems. For example, if you are a foreign company that and you are working on China, your data has to stay on China. Okay, you cannot do the cross-border. So what happens to these data? The clouds, the servers are in China. It's a big issue that cannot be solved by a single country. Okay, but I think now everyone understood the importance of data in our country. Li Kai-fu called the China has the Saudi Arabia, because we know that the new pool of this world is data. So everyone wants to protect their data and want that other countries cannot have more data. Why? Because the artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, work just because of data. Okay, because there are a lot of workers that feed the machines, the algorithm with data. So if you are a company that operates in China, I don't want that these data or the Chinese data. I don't want it as in any country. Your artificial could be a problem for my artificial intelligence, for my TikTok, for example. Okay, so it's an act of faith. We have to trust that every country want to regulate this topic, but I think it's very hard. Okay, because even the how can I say, the definition of data is different. The personal data, for example, what is the personal data? It's not very easy, and there isn't any independent authorities that can decide what is the personal data. So we are in these waves, and we have to understand how to match different systems. And I think there is a big missing point. We, the people, we don't have any voice on this, and I think this is the thing that we have to do. Okay, ask the government to try to create a dialogue with government, to ask questions and to say also what we can do, what we want that they can do with this data. It's a very hard question. Maybe later per email we can do easily. Okay.
It's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. We are getting some hard questions. We have Boris Au who would like to ask you a question. Let me just remind that we're almost out of time, so let's do this quickly.
Okay. Just clear one question. Okay. Thank you. And it's about the barrier to develop social credit in European society. I think it's about the concept of the society, the individual concept. So do you think that because of the people don't trust about the community concept, that means they turn back to nationalism? They don't believe the foreign powers such as China and the host have mentioned. So do you think that is about the turn back, that the globalization is no longer in fact developing the smart city? So can you give me some opinion and explain it simply, and then that's all.
I don't hear very well, sorry, because my connection is not stable, so I don't hear very well the question. May you repeat or just summarize?
Do you think that the turn back of the nationalism in Europe makes people have a stereotype to the sharing the technology of China and other monopoly power about developing a smart city? Do you think that the stereotype, the racism and the nationalism is the main factors to the barrier to developing the smart cities?
I understood you asked if the nationalism of European country can be an obstacle to the smart city project taken from China, if I understood. Is the question? Sorry, I really don't hear very well. Okay, but yes, of course. For example, Eastern European countries are very close to China. You know, the first countries that signed, for example, a memorandum of understanding was just the Visegrad group, what we call Visegrad group. So it's very strange, no, because they are nationalists, very populist and nationalists, but in the end, they want a lot of help from China. So I think they can be the first countries that are involved in this kind of project of internationalization of smart cities, of Chinese smart cities. But we have to understand that China doesn't want to export their model, its model, okay? China doesn't want to export the Chinese model to other countries, as well don't want to export the smart cities, the Chinese smart city in other countries. They don't want that every smart city in Europe or Latin America or USA is the same of what's happening in China. They just want to export the hardware, okay, first of all. Then the software, okay, is what the Chinese call meritocracy, and the efficiency of their politics is very interesting for a lot of the European government, as we see during the coronavirus issue. So a lot of European countries look at China and say, wow, you see China in 1 month, they solved the problem. Why? Because they put people on the apartments, they cannot get off from the apartment, etc. But China doesn't, it's not interested to say, okay, you have to do like us. First of all, China is interested to say, buy our products because they work. You know, we talked in the previous question, we talked a lot about data. Why China is so strong in artificial intelligence, algorithm, all these kind of things? Because they have a lot of data. Let's think to WeChat, for example. Okay, with WeChat, you can pay, you can buy everything offline and online. You are constantly traced by WeChat. These are data that for the machines, for algorithms, are vital, are very important, because more data, more artificial intelligence, because the machines have to learn to be similar to us, you know, to understand us better every day more. So, and for this reason, the Chinese product works better than others. Also because China can do a lot of experiments with their products. For example, in Africa, where the Chinese connection is so hard, you know, so strong, we know the history of the relation, the Chinese and African relation, with a lot of problems, of course. But they can use a lot of countries with which they have a lot of agreements to, for example, for the facial recognition. They have a lot of African countries that can help Chinese scientists, a Chinese company, to understand better how to recognize different faces. Of course, the black ones are more difficult than the Caucasic one to be recognized. Of course. So the Chinese projects are better. And so the video cameras, we know that a lot of US military headquarters are already using the Chinese technologies. So this is the first thing that China wants to do: export their technologies. And when you have to buy something, it's important that is cheaper and the products have to be good products. So the nationalism doesn't count in this case. You know, they have a lot of projects together, even if there are some problems in the last weeks, in the last months, especially with some this country. So we have to understand that the linkages of what we talked about some questions ago. We have to understand that we will not see a future in which our cities will be like the Chinese ones. Okay, but we have to understand that what's happening in China in terms of hardware and software is interesting for our government because it works in the end. Okay, and so this is my problem: how can you transplant something that happens in an authoritarian system in a democratic one? So this is something that asks to us, which is the nowadays condition of our democracy. So I think this is our big question. And data are very important to understand which level today we have in our democracy, of democracy.
Mr. Pierani, we have one question that I would like to ask. There's more actually, but if you have to go, do let us know. Otherwise, I have one very short question for you.
Yes. Okay, this one is very short.
Okay. From Eleonora Di Benedetto, she asks, concerning the social credit system as applied to businesses, could we say it's trying to enforce trust between various levels of organizations and employees? What is the status of trust in China, both in business and society?
Yes. The social credit system about the companies, about the business environment, I think is working very well in China. And it was accepted by Chinese people because if you know, something about China. You know that there are a lot of problems in the relation between authorities and private companies and Chinese population about some topics in particular, for example, food security, food or environment and this kind of thing. So I think that Chinese people accepted and they very like this system because now they can trust the company. If a company, for example, has a misconduct or something like this, are punished. So it's very clear that this social credit system is going to create an environment, a better environment for business in China, and it creates a new relation of trust between Chinese company and Chinese people. I think this is very important to understand why it works, this system in China, and why also the foreign companies will be under scrutiny of this system. Okay, because the process of China during the last 40, 50 years was so strong, was so it happens in a flash, I don't want to say. So it creates an environment with a lot of corruption, a lot of problems for security of people in terms of relation with the companies. So I think that this system could work very well and could be very interesting also for other countries, not only for China. But just one thing, also the private social system, the social credit system works because a lot of Chinese accept this system without problems, because they think, okay, if I'm a good citizen, why I have some problem if someone judge me as a good citizen? Okay, and because they feel that this system creates more security in their city, and it is, because in a lot of cities we have a lot of good records about criminality and so on. The problem is that there is an abuse in a lot of Chinese cities about the use of data, and this creates the things that I told you at the beginning, some reflection, some discussion about data. So it's complicated, it's not easy, but something is really working, and something I think have to be fixed in the future by the Chinese government.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Pierani, for your time and for asking all these questions. To the audience, I'm sorry we couldn't answer all of them. There were quite a few. But if you do have some questions that you would like to ask Mr. Pierani, you can send us an email and we can pass it on. Regarding our next webinar, we will be doing it on the position of EU in the middle of US and China relations. I hope to see you there. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Simone Pierani, for your time. It's been a great webinar.
Thanks to you. See you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.